Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Sorry I've been away so long, been a lot of things going on, just haven't had time to do any builds or anything really. So our first video back is going to be a build video. This is the HTPC that I was on about in the last video. So I'll just go through the parts that we've got. We've got the AVP Hyperion EV33 Black little cube case to build into. We've got a Gigabyte F2A78M-HD2 motherboard, and to go with that we have an AMD A4 5300, which is a 3.4 GHz dual core CPU. This doesn't have to be anything special because it is just going to be for web streaming and for streaming video files etc. from my server up to my TV. So we've got that. We've got 4 gig of Kingston DDR RAM, or DDR3 I believe that is, RAM to go in there. Hard drive wise, because we don't need anything big, we've got a Kingston SSD now, 60 gig SSD, basically just for an OS and the streaming apps. Graphics card wise, I'm going to be utilising my old Radeon 6770, which is a 1 gig graphics card. So we're going to be utilising that. Power, we've got a Cooler Master GX550, which is 80 plus bronze certified. So basically all of this is going to go into this case, and then of course obviously we've got screwdriver, side cutters, cable ties and cooling paste. So first thing we'll do, now this is going to be a different video, we're not going to be time-lapsing this, you're actually going to be doing it in real time. So if anybody's building a PC and they want to follow along with me, by all means do so. So first thing we're going to do is move the case out of the way, and we're going to prep the motherboard. Move these out of the way. So SATA cables, of which we will only be using one, IO shield, beep speaker. Now I have actually had this combination running before together, so I don't have to do an out of the case test assembly. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to zoom the camera in. Okay, so first things first, we need the CPU out of the box. As I said before, I have had this test assembly before, so I've taken the CPU back out, and I have cleaned all of the paste off with some rubbing alcohol. So, general rule of thumb, we've got the ZIF lever, so we pop that up. On the socket there will be a little triangle in one corner, and this matches up with the little gold triangle on the CPU. The two match up, and then your CPU should just drop into the socket with, as the name suggests, zero insertional force. Then just push the lever down, lock it in place. CPU is now seated. Also in the box is the CPU cooler. Now because we're not overclocking and we're not going to be doing anything strenuous with this, the out of the box stock cooler will do the job of what's required of this particular machine, because it is not going to be overclocked, it's not going to be doing heavy duty gaming or anything like that, or even heavy duty workstation stuff. It is just going to be streaming from the web or streaming from my server. That's all it's going to do. So we'll go ahead and get the paste. Usual rule, P of cooler, P of paste, smack bang in the middle of the IHS. Normally try and go just a tiny little bit smaller, so that when this spreads you get a really thin smear of paste on the cooler. Okay, so hook that over there, pop that over there, hook that that onto this side and lock down, and then try and wing the cable for the CPU fan all the way around just to tidy it up. That's the system fan. There's a CPU fan one on here. Oh, CPU fan one is around here. Right, I'm going to have to tie this cable off somewhere. Probably just tuck it down the side of the cooler. Like so. Anybody who knows me will know that I am quite, for want of a better word, anal about cable management. I do like to have my cases looking rather neat and tidy. So that's the CPU seated. We now have the RAM to put in. Now it's only one stick, but we do have 2 slots. So we need to check the motherboard manual and see which slot it needs to go into. I know for a fact it needs to go into the one nearest to the 24-pin ATX connector. So we pop that in and clip it in place. So that is the motherboard now prepped. So we now move on to prepping the case. So I'll put that off to one side. Okay, so we actually need to take, if you've watched my review, you know this is a twin chamber case. So we're going to take all 4 of the rear thumb screws out. And remove both the side panels. We have our bag of accessories, so motherboard mounting screws, etc, etc. The case itself already has standoffs installed on the motherboard side. On the other side we have the hard drive bays, power supply bay here, and here is where you could put in a 5 1/4 inch drive, so either an optical drive or a large old, a really old hard drive if you wanted to. But we're not actually going to be using that, so the only things that are going in this side will be power supply and the SSD up into this corner here. So first thing we're going to do is actually mount the SSD. So this should just clip, slide into the back of the case here. So I have done building one of these cases before, but it was a couple of months ago now. So slide that in place, and bingo, that is the SSD mounted. And the next thing we have to mount in this side of the case is the power supply. So now, unfortunately, the power supply, the GX 550, is not a modular power supply. So we are going to be stuck with a load of cables left over. Unfortunately, it isn't full ketchup and mustard. I mean, it is braided sleeving, but obviously the ends of the cables, it is still ketchup and mustard. But because this is just for me and it's for a HTPC where nothing's on display because you've got sealed side panels, there's no clear side panels, it's not really going to bother me. So next thing we do, now we're actually mounting this fan side out, because on the side panel there is venting for it to draw cool air in through the side of the case to keep the power supply nice and cool. So we're going to put these in, go to our bag of case accessories. 1, 2, 3, 4 screws for the power supply. Now, I myself, when I'm dealing with PC parts, some people say have a magnetic tip screwdriver. My personal preference is to not use anything magnetic, because you are dealing with electrostatic sensitive devices, and magnets are not good for electrostatic sensitive devices. So I always try to make sure that there is no magnets anywhere in the vicinity of a build. If I do find that my screwdriver is becoming slightly magnetised, purely because of the environment, then I tend to take a small hammer and on a hard surface tap the tip of the screwdriver a few times, not really bash it, but just tap the tip of the screwdriver a few times, and it will demagnetise the screwdriver again. But like I say, everyone has their own personal preference. My personal preference is not to have magnets involved anywhere along the line. Right, so our power supply is now mounted. So we know we're going to need our 24-pin ATX. So we can feed that through this hole here, because I know that's roughly where it's going to want to come through for the motherboard. Okay, our 8-pin EPS also needs to come through that opening, because there is no opening near the top of the case from memory. No, there isn't. Oh yes, there is. Yeah, there's one just up the top here. I don't know if you can see that on the video. It's going to come through just here with my fingers wiggling. So that's where our 8-pin EPS will come through for the motherboard. And then we are left with all the Molex, etc., and our PCIe power. Now, this graphics card does actually require 6-pin PCIe, so we're going to have to feed this through as well, and we'll probably feed that through the same hole. Well, actually no, we can go a bit lower. There's actually another hole just here, so we'll feed the 6-pin PCIe through that hole, and then basically we're left with the Molexes and SATA power cables. So because we've got that empty 5¼ inch bay in this side of the case, we can just bundle all the cables into that bay out of the way. It's like having a power supply shroud on a normal ATX case, where you can bundle your cables down below the shroud. And then I've just kept one SATA power cable out for the SSD. So we'll just fold that up this way out of the way for now. The next thing we need to do now is actually get the I/O shield into the case so that we can then mount the motherboard. So we will put this in, and a general rule of thumb with I/O shields, if you can see it on the video, you've got 3 holes down here which are your normal audio ports, so mic in, line in and speakers. They normally go towards the bottom of the case, and then pop it in from the inside and just make sure that all the sides click into place. Just double check everything's securely fitted in place, and that is the case now, pretty much prepped for the motherboard going in. So we will now fit the motherboard. Okay, so as you can see, the I/O shield's in, we've got all the standoffs in ready, we've got all the cables through but pulled up out of the way. So now we'll take the motherboard, generally always just pick it up by the cooler if it's a small cooler, and then we line the I/O ports up with the shield, and it should just drop into place, and it does quite nicely. So now we take our screws for the motherboard, and I tend to do the one furthest away from the I/O shield first. I don't do it up all the way, it's just there as a placeholder for the motherboard. Just while I get the other screws in. And then once they're all in, I can nip them up. Now, the rule here is, do not nip them up so tight that you then strip the threads on the standoffs within the case. Otherwise, should you ever come to try to remove the motherboard, say you're doing an upgrade or whatever, you'll find that the screw will stay in the standoff will come out of the case, and you will find it very hard to separate the screw and the standoff, i.e. to separate them from either side of where they go through the motherboard. So I tend to just get them to where they're a little bit tight, and then do maybe a quarter turn on the screw, just to do the final nip up, and you'll find that that is generally enough to hold the motherboard in place. Right, so they're all in, so that's nipped and quarter turn, and I tend to do this almost like doing an engine, a head on an engine, do it opposites. So you work round and you get an equal tension on the motherboard as it's going into the case. So that is the motherboard now mounted in place. The next thing we need to do really is, I'll generally tend to, before trying to put anything else bulky in there such as a graphics card, I tend to try and get all of the other cables attached, and the one cable that I like to get attached before anything else, because they are a real pain, is all the little front panel connectors. So I'll move that out of the way. So it's all of these little devils. So we've got front audio, and 2 lots of USB. As per the review on this case, the USB 3 header, which this motherboard does have USB 3, if your motherboard doesn't have it, the USB 3 header on this comes with a tail to turn it into USB 2. So you don't actually waste the header or the front port on the case by not being able to use the USB 3 port. You can use it as a USB 2. But this motherboard, this case does actually have a USB 3 port, so we will be using that, and then obviously the front audio and the other front USB 2.0. But first of all, I like to get these little things attached. So hard drive LED, as usual, power LED is split into 2 wires, reset and power. And we have, if I can find where the front panel is, yes, right, okay, so which one was that? That's hard drive LED, reset switch. You'll tend to find as well now with most motherboard manufacturers that the layout of the pins for the front panel are pretty much uniform. You would normally find in your row of, well, in your bank of 10, where the top right hand one has got no pin, the top left 2 are your power LED, the bottom left 2 are your hard drive LED, your next 2 are power switch and then reset switch. And that's pretty much become an industry standard now, as opposed to the old days when every time you did a build, if it was a different motherboard manufacturer, you had to look in the manual so that you knew what pins went where, and it was a royal pain. Okay, so that goes around like that way. What's just come out? I'll drive out of there, I think. Yeah. So refit that one. And those. Because becoming industry standard now. I wish motherboard manufacturers or case manufacturers would now actually make the power LED just as a 2-pin plug. But they are still catering for people that are putting older gear into newer cases, where on some old motherboards the power LED, instead of being 2 pins next to each other, they were split by an empty space. So that's why they still do the power LEDs as separate pins. So that's that one. We'll now do USB 3, which will go into here. Have to be very careful with USB 3. I've seen a lot of people actually either break pins or actually break the frame around the pins, and the socket on the motherboard becomes totally unusable. So this is our HD audio, which actually goes over to this plug here, and then we have our front USB 2.0, which will go here. Now the motherboard actually has front USB 1 and front USB 2, so it does actually cater for additional USB headers on a case, or if you've got, say, an ATX case that's got a 3.5-inch drive bay for an old floppy, but you were putting a card reader in, you could utilise the front USB 2 port for the USB feed for the card reader. But we're not doing any of that in this case at all today. So that is all my front panel connectors plugged in. I will tidy the cables up afterwards. I won't bother filming that because it's very boring watching me tidy cables up. So the next big thing we've got to plug in from the back is our 24-pin ATX power supply, which the two parts should just slide together and then plug onto motherboard like so. Push into here a firm click, which is, there we go, that's just it, it's clicked in now, and then we can push those extra cables back into the back. And then we have our 8-pin EPS, which is actually over to this side, and again, like the 4-pin addition to the 20-pin for the main ATX, these two cables actually slide together and make an 8-pin plug. And they will slide together. That's why I'm doing it the wrong side. Right, so they will go in here like so. And same as the 24-pin, you have a resounding click once it's in place and latched over the socket on the motherboard, and then we'll just tidy that cable back out of the way that way. So we're still leaving plenty of airflow space through the front of the case. So we have one last thing to put in this side and to plug in, and that is our graphics card with our 6-pin PCIe. So here we have our graphics card. I just have to remove the cover plate at the back of the case to allow me to remove the blanking plate where the PCIe slot is. Right, so now some motherboards will have a flick back clip at the back of the PCIe slot. This one actually just has a flexible clip which will move itself out of the way as the card goes in. So we line the card up with the opening and the slot on the motherboard. It will go in and push. And there we have it. It's a little bit on the tight side, this one, for some reason. I could have something to do with the plate there. So we'll try again. Could be something to do with the shroud. It's slightly proud of the edge of the case, so it's interfering with mounting in the case here. So we may have to remove this small piece of blanking to allow for the shroud to pop through. And I think that will then open it up and make it easier to fit. Very strange. I never had this problem when I had this card at another machine. Right, okay, not a problem. We shall persevere. So that is the card mounted. Just need to slacken it off a little bit, move it down so we've got access to the HDMI port, which is what we're going to be using. So there we have it, graphics card fitted, and now we just need to put some PCIe power to it. And as with the 24 pin and the 8 pin, we have a clip on the plug that clips onto the little latch on the side of the graphics card, which gives us a resounding click as it goes into place. And then we'll just tidy those cables back again out of the way. That one I'll just have to tie off somehow. So that is pretty much everything fitted in the case. The only thing left to do is to put a SATA cable, or if one of our friends watching in the States, SATA cable, plug it onto the motherboard, and it will go onto this port down the front, down here, because that is SATA 0, and then we'll feed it through the back, probably through that one, and we still have to put power and data to our SSD. So there is our data cable, and which way around is that? I think that. Does it go that way? Yes. And there is our power to our SSD. So to all intents and purposes, that PC is now built. That's pretty much the PC built. All we've got to do now is just do a bit of cable management and get Windows installed, along with all the updates, etc, etc, and the applications for streaming from the server and from the web. I'm not going to do a video of all the cable management and everything else, so we're going to flip straight over to the system actually up and running. So Windows is in, we're just going through the basic setup now. So who's going to use this PC? Well, it's going to be a HT PC. So we'll call it HT PC. Don't need a password on it because there's going to be no sensitive data on this whatsoever. We're not going to use Cortana. We're not going to use any of the options that Microsoft gives us as part of the setup, because we don't want to send them any data. Don't want to give them anything private about us, even though there's going to be nothing kept, no sensitive data kept on this machine. It will be connected to my network, so we don't want anybody snooping through my network. The network itself is firewalled, and there's no way they're getting in. So, and all the files on the server will require passwords to get into them anyway. So we'll just let this finish setting up Windows. There we have it, Windows 10 Pro installed, 64-bit. We're showing the Radeon processor is the A45300 APU with Radeon HD graphics, 3.4 GHz. I know it's a dual core. We've got 4 GB of RAM, 64-bit OS, and we've renamed the computer as HTPC, so it's recognised on the network here at the home. And that is pretty much it. The rest of it's just the supplementary programs and an antivirus, just to keep it safe on the network. But other than that, that is the build done. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please pop a like on it, hit the subscribe button so you get notified when the next video comes up. Any comments, please put them down below, and we'll see you in the next one.